So I want to start with a question that somebody emailed to us a little bit earlier in the week. Bless their hearts. That they want to know I don't mean to laugh but you know how life is funny sometimes when it's over. Someday you will laugh about this. Not this week though. My almost 6-year-old son is verbal and fully independent with his toileting. Woohoo, right? He is going through a stage of putting things in the toilet, especially expensive electronics. I believe it is basically sending a screw you message to me because he can tell that I get angry when he does it. This is because the behavior occurs when I put limits or demands on him. I love how you're noticing that that's when it happens. I don't know what to do, and we have just moved into a 2-story house with 3 toilets. I've thought of toilet locks, but he usually takes himself to the toilet, and he is probably old enough to undo them. I'm going to limit access as much as possible, but I have an older 10-year-old who has iPods, DS consoles, etc. I've tried punishment by taking away favorite items for a time, but every lapse is very expensive. I just want it to stop. Also, he actually loves playing with iPods, DS games, etc. So taking away these items will be punishing him, so I'll do that too. What else can I do?
Okay. There's a lot of different parts to this. So
yes, I'm going to let you have the email so that you can...
Okay, so this is a 6-year-old and he's fully independent with toileting. So he's going through the stage of putting objects in the toilet, especially... So it says especially expensive electrical items. Does he... I don't know if he throws away other objects as well or just electrical objects. I would, this behavior, the first response is in order to deal with it correctly, you have to prevent it and then reteach him how to do it appropriately. So anything that's, if you could put away electrical items, if you could lock the toilet, it'll at least take him a little bit longer to unlock the toilet. Perhaps you can lock the doors. In other words, do whatever you can. In ABA, we call it blocking. So you're basically preventing the the action from happening. If you're correct that, and this is what's hard for a behavior analyst, that you always need to kind of try to figure out the function of a behavior, why it's happening, and the parent here is saying, Tara, I think, is saying, or that you should actually, he's trying to say, whatever you, and he's not very happy with the demands. So if he's trying to do it to get your negative attention, if he's trying to get back at you, then what you do is you don't get angry. So you just don't give him that. You don't give him the reaction that he's trying to get out of you. So if he does that, you're very, very matter of fact and you're not angry about things. And obviously you would, what you're doing, by the way, is not punishment. It's response cost. You're taking away some things from him, which is perfectly fine. So continue doing exactly that. So first you're blocking it. Second, you're not showing a reaction. Third, if it does happen without showing a reaction, you simply go and take an item away that he really cares about. And that's the sort of what you should do immediately. Okay, so that's sort of the status quo. That'll put things in a I guess it'll stop things from getting worse right away. Now, the main thing is, now that this is what gets very hard for me when I try to give advice for kids that I don't know. Does he understand, does he connect the let's say, his behavior to what it causes? Does he understand that what he's doing is bad? And why is it bad? Mm-hmm. Because right now it seems to me that he doesn't really realize that his behavior is upsetting like it's hurting his brother, perhaps, and it doesn't sound like he wants to upset or hurt his brother. He just wants to kind of get your attention. Right. So all of these things lead me to believe that at the same time that you're not giving him attention for doing the behavior, you're trying to block the behavior, and if the behavior happens to happen, you will response cost it. aside from that, you need to be spending more positive attention with him. So in other words, he's trying to seek out attention. So give him attention for good behavior. So one of the things you could do potentially is kind of an overcorrection, or it's a process, it's part of an overcorrection procedure. So you might actually want to have a pile of electronics, and perhaps they should be useless electronics, like maybe old stuff that doesn't really work, and just put it in a basket in the bathroom and actively practice with him taking these objects back to the bedroom and putting them away. In other words, reward the reverse of what he's doing. So, because the whole concept is you're taking away attention for bad behavior, you want to make sure he understands what good behavior is, and that you want to give it a lot of attention and reward. So I would say probably that's your best bet, is to teach the reverse of the behavior, to not react. A lot of times our kids are just doing things because they kind of enjoy the reaction they get out of us, and to block it. But the most important part of all of this is that when a child starts to try to get negative attention-seeking, like when they do negative attention-seeking behavior, that means they're just not getting enough attention. Now, you might be giving him a ton of attention, but from his perspective, it's just not enough. So you need to spend that one-on-one time rewarding him from some other good things. Trust me, if he gets enough attention from other things, he's just not, this is not going to be, getting you upset is not going to be that valuable to him anymore.
One of the reasons why I so love this is because I think a lot of us as parents would get one side of that and not the other.
Right.
And if you only do one side of it, it's not going to be effective. But what you're talking about is making sure that you take away the attention for the thing that's happening and give it in other areas. And if we were to leave one of those out, it wouldn't get the job done.
Right, because he's trying to get attention.
Yeah.
Right? So if not with this, he'll do it a different way. And the thing is also, you and I often talk about this, is that as parents, I know this myself, as parents we often think we can deal with things just on the fly as it's happening, and you can't. I know that you have we all have busy lives and there's a lot of stuff going on, but for me it's very easy to comment on these things because everything that happens, I see it as an intervention, I see it as a treatment, and I do this with my kids too. I mean, I will go and sit down and say, okay, this is a problem behavior, this is what I want to change, the antecedents, these are the consequences, and I actually make it happen. Like, good example, last night I'm in bed and it's like past midnight and I'm thinking, this is not really good. My 14-year-old son has now gradually gotten to the point where, and it's my fault too, where his bedtime has shifted to like 11:30 or something, gradually, right? And it's partially because the two of us get sucked into these crazy TV series, and I never have time to do anything, so I'm watching this stuff with him until late at night. So I thought to myself, now if I go back to him and say, you have to change this, we have to start taking your schedule back to 10 o'clock. He's a 14-year-old kid in 10th grade. He's just going to laugh at me,
right?
Let's be serious. He's going to say, yeah, okay, sure, Mom. And then he'll go to his room and he'll still be on his computer until 12.
Right.
So I need to do a shaping procedure so that he doesn't really notice it. Good thing he's in school, he won't hear this right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to 5 minutes each night gradually push it back, very gradually. It'll take me, I don't know, months maybe, whatever, or 2 weeks, but it'll be a very gradual procedure. And in the mornings, of course, I'll wake him up a little tiny bit earlier, so, he will adjust without necessarily even thinking about it. So a lot of times you actively have to change your life process in order to make things work. Otherwise, it just becomes too difficult. And like something like this, I can understand. I can just see it. He takes electronics, throws it in the bathroom, sibling gets upset, mom's dealing with all of that.
Right.
That's just terrible. It's very difficult.
Absolutely. But to the child, there's an element of it there's a paycheck.
Right.
So very, very interesting.
And he might have other reasons, and that's why it's important, if you have a behaviorist in your life, it would be good to do a functional analysis. See, maybe he's not doing it just to get you upset. Maybe he likes the sound of electronics in water. I don't know.
The famous story in our family was that when my sister and my brother and I were little, somebody gave us a bunch of teeny tiny little perfume bottles.
Yeah.
And our favorite thing in the world was to flush them down the toilet.
Are you serious?
I'm serious. And it's a famous story in my family because my father, after the second time fixing the toilet, and the plumber said, "Why are there 12 little bottles of perfume caught in the thing?" My father's head came off and flew around the room, and he forbid all of us to do it. And of course, I think it was my brother who went in and just got caught flushing them down. I have no idea to this day. I remember doing it, and it was fun. It was like theater.
Yeah.
We stood there and watched it swirl and go down. I couldn't tell you more about it, but all three of us found it enthralling.
And perhaps for different reasons. Perhaps you watched it go down in a circle and you thought that's fascinating, but your brother perhaps even increased his behavior when your dad got mad because his thing was control.
Right.
Like, I don't want anybody to tell me what to do. I want to, who knows? We all have different reasons.
And it wasn't as expensive. It was a gift, these little bottles of perfume, but it was expensive when the plumber came.
Yes.
So anyway, bless your heart. And we also sent you a message saying, look and see whether your homeowner's insurance will cover any of the cost of the electronics that you've lost. Write us back and let us know how it works for you, trying to give more attention in other areas and blocking the behavior. We'd love to hear back from you.
And one final thing I just quickly read is that since you know that this behavior seems to increase when you place demands on him, so he's trying to avoid the demands, which is more important probably, just make sure he can't avoid the demands. Just make sure that when you do place demands on him, perhaps you're watching him for the next 20 minutes. So don't reduce your demands. We don't realize how our kids' behaviors change ours. We always talk about how we do things, consequence to behavior, and then we change our kids' behaviors, but you realize that it works both ways. So because you're trying to avoid him throwing things in the bathroom, don't stop your behavior. He's basically punishing you. Every time you place a demand on him, he will throw something in the toilet.
Yeah.
So he's punishing you, and so the likelihood is that you have shied away from placing more demands. You're avoiding it now. We end up doing that with our kids. We walk on eggshells around certain topics, because we know it'll upset them.
Yeah.
And so don't change your behavior. If you change your behavior, you've told him it worked. So keep placing demands. Just watch him and prevent him from doing that behavior right after you place a demand.
Great advice. Okay, this is a very open-ended question, but they wrote, "My 5-year-old son is having a lot of behavior issues in the classroom. What can I do to help reduce the behavior issue?" Now, we don't know what the behavior is, so very open-ended, but maybe we can talk a little bit about when you're getting those notes from school, how do you proceed? Because I think a lot of parents feel helpless. So he's doing something and we have an expectation. Well, then this teacher is supposed to do something. We're not allowed in the classroom a lot of the time, and yet we get the note. Your child is doing this at school. So what can we do as parents?
Well, that's a very difficult question to answer because I don't know the relationship with the school. And I think the most important thing is we all have different relationships with our teachers and schools. Do we have an age on the child?
5.
So we're talking elementary, obviously very young. And so I think... it's such a difficult balancing act with teachers because you're not there and you don't want to go in and yell at the teacher and they take it out on your kid when you're not there, So it really is a balancing act. I guess I was always very lucky. I changed schools for my kids just a couple of times, but I ultimately found schools where either the teachers were good or the principal was spectacular. I could always depend on the principal to understand things and to take my side, I guess, or to understand what was or wasn't good. And if a teacher went out of line, the principal, you could turn to that person. So I would probably just, if you have concerns about the teacher, then you should probably find someone in the school who's a senior and have a conversation. If it really is just a matter of how do I communicate better with the teacher, there's multiple ways. A lot of times teachers will stop sending you notes home if you call them every single day. Call them. call her every day and say, okay, let's talk about this. I need to know what happened. How did it happen? How do we do this? Plus, the other thing is, get some IBT training perhaps for the teacher. I mean, sometimes you're talking about very nice teachers who simply don't know what to do. And maybe with some training, it'll give them some guidance. And we have modules. This is the holidays coming up, and you can easily purchase these modules. I think they're like $7.50 or $10 or something each.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I'm not supposed to tell you, but starting tomorrow, we're going to have some that we're going to be giving away on the show.
Great. Yeah.
And I was just on there last night looking at some, because I'm going to be giving a teacher for the holiday, and there are some amazing, very specific trainings just for teachers
really
about,
good ones, yeah.
about
like
setting up a token economy, how to deal with behaviors in the classroom, and they break it down into different kinds.
They're just spectacular. I'm so proud of the gang for that stuff. I just looked at it. It's open on my second screen all the time now. And I'm amazed. I mean, the number of trainings we've done now for teachers, actually, the educators section is the largest. It's huge. There's a lot of trainings there. It's awesome.
And that's at ibehavioraltraining.com. And one of the things that I'm going to be talking about, and that really struck me yesterday looking at it, is there's so many trainings. It's sort of like going to the ultimate gift shop. There's so many things you go, ooh, I'd like to do that. Oh, I'd like to do that. But if nothing else, there is a training on behavior success outside of the classroom, dealing with emergency preparedness. I think it's either $7 or $10, and even if that was the only one you gave, think about the peace of mind knowing that your teacher is prepared in case of an emergency to deal with whatever might come up with your child, and has the best strategy to have your child safe in an emergency.
Right. We're doing actually
$10 worth. Oh, the peace of mind.
Yeah, we just started to do a whole bunch of these for first responders. That's why there's that there now, because we realized, we need to do one for teachers too. But yeah, so that's really important. But I mean, so just going back to this question, you're dealing with different aspects of it. You want to make sure your teacher is trained. You want to make sure your teacher has access to you. I would probably contact the teacher pretty regularly. Some parents have actually gone to the point of having a camera installed in the classroom, because these days it's so easy and inexpensive to have a camera. I have cameras all over my house, and I can log on here at my desk and see them. So, you can easily do that. Parents, if the group of parents in the classroom all agree, then you're sharing the cost of that, and it's beautiful to be able to see your kids. There's nothing against the law. That's something that actually you can have. It's just a matter of all the parents agreeing, because now you're observing their kids as well.
Yes.
And so those are other things. I mean, I know it's difficult. A lot of, but I honestly, I think the main thing is try to stay in contact. Sometimes teachers are just, and in my family I have some teachers, and I have to tell you that they just get frustrated, because there are also parents who simply don't want to deal with anything.
Yeah.
They just want to drop their kids off and don't care.
Yeah, that's very prevalent. So staying involved, it's a great thing. I always love the idea of volunteering. Sometimes it's difficult to get time to come in and observe your child, but if you volunteer, they'll almost always let you come in and cut up paper and glue things and be there, or do center time. A very beneficial thing to do. All right, we're going to take a little break, and then we're going to come back more with your questions for Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh. Stick with us. Welcome back to Ask Dr. Doreen. We are here with Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh. She is a true expert in the field of autism, been treating children on the autism spectrum for multiple decades. I don't like to give away how long. I think it's rude, because you don't look at what your age must be. Yeah. So in any case, I also like to remind everybody that she's a visionary in the field of autism. You really have a far-reaching ability to look ahead and see and get in place things that help our kids. So kind of goes hand in hand with a question that somebody just wrote in. Hello, Shannon and Dr. Doreen. This is more like a general information question for parents. Why is it that most ABA companies only focus on the behaviors aspect and do not consider teaching skills like CARD? I thought that insurance considered ABA payable because of the whole concept of teaching rather than just the behaviors. Could you please clarify this, and thank you for your time.
That's so awesome. Oh, I love this parent. I asked the same question. You know, the field. So first of all, insurance is paying for ABA, and they don't know what that is. Let's just put it that way. Like, they really don't. So they're going to pay for the board-certified behavior analyst whether or not they're teaching. So I've been working with so many insurance companies now for so many years that I'm really trying to educate them on what ABA is. This was a big sudden swoop to insurance companies. They had no clue what's happening, and it's all getting approved and funded and so on. They really don't, which is also why a lot of our denials are being denied by pediatricians, for instance, who are on panels that they don't know what ABA is, they don't understand, they expect the child to be done with ABA in 6 months. There's a lot of education that still needs to go to insurance companies, and talking about it here makes me think I need to write something for them that's maybe more, well, our book's coming out soon, so it'll talk more about it. But yeah, so going back, the way ABA developed in the field was, there was, you know, I guess I'll go all the way back to 78, and 1978 or so, there was very limited amount of ABA anywhere in the country. In fact, it wasn't even called ABA, it was called behavior modification. And back then, we were still struggling with other things. There was a group of people that said, oh, this is all about parenting. There was a lot of different things going on in the 70s. In somewhere around 80s or so, and I was at UCLA, and it was really pretty much the only program in the country that was working with autism. Autism was very low prevalence back then, very low. I mean, we had 1 in 10,000 kids max. We had 1 in 15 to 1 in 10,000 kids. So it was not something anybody knew anything about. And we're talking, what is this now, 2013? So it was like 45 years ago. Good Lord.
I know.
How is that possible? No, 35 years ago. 35 years ago. 35 years ago, yeah. Anyway, so back then, that was just a time where people had no idea of what autism is, and so there wasn't much ABA. The Lovas ideology that came out of UCLA, and this was Professor Ivar Lovas, we were trained to teach. More than anything else, we were trained on techniques that have to do with teaching. That's why Lovas became sort of correlated to the term discrete trial training. It's not really discrete trial training, but it's, you know, part of what we did with Lovas at UCLA was discrete trial. But we were experimenting really with different teaching techniques to see how they work best on kids with autism. And all we had concluded, if you look at the Me book, which was the first book that Ivar wrote about how to work with kids with autism, and I used to use that book to teach undergrads. But I mean, I was an undergrad then myself, but then later became a grad, and I was teaching undergrads using those techniques, and all it was had to do with just techniques to get their attention, techniques to keep instructions short, you know, ways to prompt the child so that they would. So we were developing all this stuff. We were developing different prompts. You know, how do you? If I put an object in front of someone, they pay more attention to it. If I hold it up, they do. We literally would experiment, do research, publish it, and write it in the book. Like that was constantly happening for 12 years. And then we're talking, so that was just coming out of the Lovas camp, and then on the other side there was all the behavioral stuff that had already been written by Skinner, B.F. Skinner. And Skinner, all of his work was accepted. Of course, it was like this whole field of psychology called learning psychology, and all of that though was not applied to autism. It was just applied to everything else. I mean everything, but not specifically to autism. So it was Ivar Lovas who was the first person to take those concepts of how to change behavior and apply them to autism. Now, because we were also developing teaching techniques and all these principles of behavior change were already in place, then you bring them together and now you have what really should be ABA, and that's what CARD does. I was trained solely by Ivar, met Skinner a few times, but mainly just by Ivar. And so And then I developed a lot and learned a lot over the course of the years and added things to the CARD program and so on. But most behaviorists, then what happened is that, like, we did this whole program with UCLA, and then there was only a few of us that that graduated from that program. So our thinking is quite different, but then we've been around. So I've been around for, 35 years. So I've trained a ton of people. So if someone has worked at CARD, which, at least half the population out there providing services have at some point been at CARD.
Right.
And if they've stayed long enough to be more than just a junior therapist, they've learned all of it. They've learned how to design teaching programs and how to monitor behavior and modify behavior. But other than that, the field exploded and became ABA, and then universities, they were not teaching curriculum. They weren't teaching how to teach. They were teaching techniques that had mostly to do with behavior change, reducing challenging behaviors. So the field just hasn't developed, but God willing, within the next 5 or 10 years, we'll keep perfecting it, and more behaviorists will learn how to teach, because that's so important. If you just, try to... I think that's part of the reason that people are always asking for CARD centers in different states now, because if you just try to get rid of behavior, it's useless. Like, the child is exhibiting challenging behaviors because they want something.
Right.
And unless you teach them a more appropriate way to get that, it's just going to keep coming back.
Yeah, I one of the reasons why I'm always saying here to all of you, if you're looking for an ABA provider, that I encourage you to go to centerforautism.com first. See if there's a location close to you. I always like to say there are many ABA providers out there, and there are many good ones, and a lot of them, as you said, have people that have at some point been trained by you or by people at CARD. But for me, I know I see lots of friends that have ABA providers that weren't CARD, and the idea of, I remember very early on the concept of, and seeing a video that you did talking about decreasing some behaviors and increasing other behaviors, and that's what we're going to do to catch your child up.
Right.
And to me, that was, I went, oh, that I can understand, that I can get behind, that gives me infinite amounts of hope.
Yeah, and that's all it is. I mean, that's all it is.
But a lot of people aren't getting that. I mean,
Right.
I feel for this person who wrote in, because a lot of people, I see other parents and they're not getting that level of focus and that level of hope. So I hope that you can continue to spread what you're doing.
Thank you. We are actually, it's growing. For me, it's always been this challenge of growing it fast enough that I can meet some of the demand, but then not too fast to lose the quality.
Yeah.
But we're expanding pretty fast, and we have so much, the more quality people you have in an organization, the faster they make it grow.
Yes.
And CARD's really grown, and we have an amazing group of quality, just incredible people here. So I always say I'm just the lucky one, because I get to take all the credit for all these spectacular people out there, that work at CARD. They're just amazing people. But the truth is, Shannon, that that slide that you're talking about is the single slide probably that I've had in my talks for more than 10 years. I can't lose that slide, because that slide really explains what we do.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing. But I do have to also say, it would be remiss of me not to say that for those of you who are watching who think, oh, well, clearly Dr. Granpeesheh knows what she's talking about, do all the other people who work for her do? My son was getting therapy from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders for 3.5 years before I ever met Dr. Granpeesheh. And people used to talk about you to me, and I saw the videos, and I was like, okay, I love the fact that she made this building, but
where is she? What does she do?
It didn't mean as much to me at that time, because we had people who were helping us that I was like, well, these are the incredible people. And somebody pointed out to me, look at how many incredible people. Where do you think that comes from? And then I had a drive to want to meet you and to know more about you. And I saw clearly after a period of time, because it's not a coincidence that there are so many rock star therapists at CARD. It comes from you to the training department, and it's a killer training department, because we have
a killer training department. We really do. Honestly, they're amazing. Yeah, they really are. They truly are. But it really just comes from being able to, we say all the time to people, like, we're trying to teach our kids. It's so funny. We're constantly talking about teaching our kids perspective taking, and then there are so many people that don't know how to take someone else's perspective just in general life. And I think the success of CARD comes from that one principle. That's the number one thing I teach my staff, supervisors, and then hopefully supervisors are teaching further down, is just take a moment to live in this person's shoes, whether it's the parent or the child or the therapist you're overseeing, whatever it is. Just take a moment and see the world from their side and understand the fears of the parents, understand how the child sees the world. That's like the biggest thing, is like, if you want to help this child, you got to see the world from their perspective, and then it works.
I would just say to people, if you're watching and you're getting ABA, and a lot of times people write in and say, I'm getting it now, I've got it through the insurance, I just don't know if it's quality ABA. If you don't have in your home or in your program what we were just talking about, that somebody is taking your perspective, taking your child's perspective, then consider switching. Because otherwise you're spinning your wheels and not getting the full effect of what you could be getting.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the same with anything, if you really think about it. Why do we change, let's say, our dentist? Because they don't care about the things that you care about. Or they care about things you don't care about. Whatever it is, they don't take your perspective. So you're always looking for someone who has that. It's just they have a certain knowledge, but they need to have the empathy and the understanding of the things that are important to you and how you process the world.
Absolutely.
So that's key. That's very important. But also, I can understand the frustration of parents, because there are young guys out there, really young, just got their master's degree and now are supposed to be telling you what to do. It's hard. It's very, very hard. There's a lot of supervisors who've never had a child. And I try to really teach them a lot how to empathize and understand, and there's no way you can understand. I can't even. I mean, I've been with parents for a long time, and I've lived the life of autism for a long time, and I've seen more sadness than any single parent would have ever seen. But and I still come, after 30 years, I will still leave clinics sometimes just crying and like thinking to myself, oh my God, how do they handle this? But you never know until it's your experience. You just don't.
Yes, we all know that. But I can say, you talk about the young, just has their master's degree, going to help you with your child. That happens on so many occasions that, the people who came through our door and made a difference were people who were in the process of getting their master's degree or just got their bachelor's degree. And some of them even were working for their bachelor's, and they changed our lives. When you've got a rock star who's trained well, amazed.
None of that matters. It's their dedication matters. Their continual plugging along and diligence and dedication and caring, and that's like one of the things I really love about our staff. They love the kids.
And so our good, we love Mike Hipple, who watches the show on a regular basis. He wants to know, is he still living? I'm assuming that you mean Lovas.
No, he passed away.
It's like 2 years ago, isn't it?
No, I think it was longer than that. I'm trying to remember the year. No, it was definitely longer than that.
We covered it on the show, so it's some time since we started the day that he passed away.
And I'm going with... sort of when I met Greg already, he was best. So I would say it was before 2010. It was before, I think maybe 2010, around there. Maybe 3 years ago or so.
So, yes, unfortunately, he is no longer with us. And so but notable to say that Dr. Granpeesheh was a part of all of that was happening with Lovas. You were a part of that young autism experiment where we got all of this, the beginning of everything good that's happened.
I was with Eva for 12 years. Really long time,
really important to note. We are going to take a quick break and come back with some more of your questions. We're going to talk about poop. Yes, we're going to go there, so stick with us. Welcome back to Autism Live, and this particular segment we call Ask Dr. Doreen. Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is here with us live answering your questions. She is, as we were talking about before, an expert in the field of autism, having been working with children for multiple decades. And we've got, I said we were going to talk about poop, so be prepared. Put that sandwich down. Here we go. My 8-year-old son recently began playing with his poop and even tasting it. This is a story we've heard before. It is freaking me out. He has never done anything like this before. Why now, and how do I get him to stop?
You know, I guess it's easy to answer this. So the reason that, well, first of all, there could be a medical reason why he could potentially have some sort of shortage of something that he's doing this behavior. You should probably have him tested, just get a blood test and make sure there's no, low levels of any kind of nutrient. This does happen with some of our kids. Like, you will also see kids, for instance, eating chalk or various other things, and actually their body is craving some sort of nutrient. With poop, it could be curiosity, it could be a sensory need because it has a certain texture, a certain smell, whatever. It's funny, the word, this is a really interesting thing that I know because I'm so old in this field, but see, I always talk about self-stimulatory behavior, and I talk about how I think it shouldn't have been called self-stimulatory, it should have been called self-soothing or calming, because a lot of the self-stimulatory behaviors are actually for the purposes of calming, like body rocking actually calms you and so on. Lining up actually reduces your anxiety and all that sort of thing, but the in the old days, in the 70s and early 80s, we had different types of self-stimulatory behaviors. Yes, we had the body rocking, but we had things where really, like, a lot of the kids were kind of very lethargic, and they would do certain things to stimulate themselves. Okay. And there was quite a period of time, like maybe 5 years or 10 years, where all the literature pointed to the concept that the children have very high sensory thresholds. So pain, they don't feel very well. Heat, cold, just certain feelings, textures, they don't, which is why they seek those out in order to stimulate themselves. So self-stimulatory, they would like to try to kind of wake themselves up. And they would do various types of things, like, now I think a lot of the kids, when they touch textures, it's calming them, but those that, like, pain for sure was one of the things. Self-injurious behavior, the whole concept of self-injurious behavior is still explained by the child can't feel pain, so they actually produce injury because you have to pass a certain threshold in order to feel it. And so with things like this, I often wonder if the sense of smell and taste and so on, which to us is just over the top and it's so difficult, with a child with autism perhaps is not. Perhaps it just enters their threshold of what they can receive from a sensory perspective. I don't know. But I mean, clearly it's not good for them. So if there is a nutritional imbalance that needs to be balanced, you need to do that. You need to find out what that is. And then, quite honestly, I mean, it's a behavior you want to reduce. What are the ways you reduce behavior? You change the antecedent or you change the consequence. What are some of the antecedents you can change? Don't give access. You prevent access. You make sure, and this is very hard because we're not watching our kids 24/7, obviously. So somehow, but please do all the things you can do, like lock the bathroom doors, put locks on the toilets. Perhaps this child is in diapers, which is why they're accessing it. Change them frequently. And then on the other end, when the behavior happens, you have to either take away a reward or you have to produce a punishing type experience. So, one of the things is overcorrection. Overcorrection is having the child, perhaps in this case, you would have the child, like, I can't answer. I don't know how it's happening. I don't know if the child is in a diaper I don't know, because if, let's say, they're in a diaper and they're pulling it out of the diaper, then you would have the child, let's say, take the diaper, throw it away, wash their hands repeatedly, sort of an overcorrection procedure, which is somewhat not fun, so it's not kind of worth the effort.
Right.
But mainly it's something that is not fun or pleasant, has to follow the behavior so that the child avoids the behavior, because every time they do it, they get some sort of aversive right after.
Okay, let's assume that it's an older child, because they're 8 years old. What if it's not in a diaper? Because the one thing that she said was, this is nothing like this has ever happened before.
True.
So what if it isn't somebody who's in a diaper? What if they're just using the toilet?
So it's always the same thing. You try to block access. So regardless of what, it's easier, obviously, if they're not in a diaper, because then how are they accessing it?
Okay.
They have to be able to...
So follow them in the bathroom?
Yeah, and you're assuming it's in the bathroom. It could also be in a closet, right? It could be anywhere.
Right.
So the thing is, you will try to block.
Okay.
So you will, for instance, make sure, here's a way you can block. You can put the child, I don't know the age of the child, but if it's appropriate, you would put them in clothing. 8 years old.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe you want to put them in overalls.
Okay.
Things that are harder to open.
Okay.
Right? So that if they are... let's say having a bowel movement outside of their clothes. If they're having a bowel movement inside their clothes, maybe you want to actually just be able to have clothing that's easier to come off so that they are not having it in their clothes.
Okay.
This is kind of a complicated way to answer, but it's always try to prevent the behavior from happening, and if it happens, then make sure you're not rewarding it. In fact, you should be taking away rewards. But a lot of kids don't understand response costs unless your child's high functioning enough.
Right.
And if he does understand the whole concept of losing something when I do this behavior, then you're all set, because then he just has to lose something every time he does this behavior. And then you can turn it into a token system, and it's a gradual intervention fade, so it doesn't become that heavy. But the concept is always the same. You prevent the behavior as much as you can, and if it occurs, you will want to, not reward it. So you'll want to either punish it or take an object away, which is sort of a form of punishment or, response cost.
Okay.
And meanwhile, find, if it's a sensory need that provoked it to begin with, give him other sensory activities.
Okay.
Right? So like finger painting or whatever it is, or have him, when he doesn't do it for periods of time, perhaps you have something like give him chewing gum or stuff that was a taste activity. This is the thing, Shannon, with you have to understand, this is why a behaviorist always has to figure out the reason.
Yeah.
So if this child is doing it because they have a textural sensory need, then you need to replace that. If they're doing it because they enjoy the odor or the sense in their mouth, then you have to replace that. So you have to replace it with things that have a similar satisfactory type thing. And you can just think of anything, smelling perfumes or chewing gum or whatever it might be. If they are doing it simply because they have a nutritional deficiency, you have to replace that, right? If they're doing it to get your attention or out of curiosity, you got to replace that. Give them other things that they can get your attention from.
So in the best possible world, have your child have a blood test done to make sure that they're not low in anything, and maybe ask your ABA provider to do
an FBA. Exactly. Have a functional assessment done to figure out why the child's doing it.
Okay.
Maybe you're a parent that can really figure that out on your own. Then make sure you're replacing that and rewarding the more appropriate replacement behavior.
Yeah.
And blocking this.
Yeah.
Because unless you block this, it'll just keep going.
I'm struck by, she says, I'm freaking out. And I think that a lot of times when these kinds of behaviors suddenly crop up, that there is an emotional component for the parent. It's like, my gosh, what is this? And it's disgusting. And, but what I'm really hearing is you still go back to the same equation of make sure there's nothing else going on.
Right.
And then find out what the function is, and then you can deal with it from there.
And here's by the way, a good aversive, okay? If you should not catch it, and if it should happen, make sure that you brush your child's teeth with some extremely strong mouthwash.
Okay.
Your child's not going to like that. You're going to be using something that's going to produce disinfection, which is important.
Right.
And it'll function as an aversive.
Okay.
It's just that simple.
Okay.
Like, you know, kids will, this is the whole concept of, you know, you say bad words, I wash out your mouth with soap, right?
Right.
But in this case, you really do need a disinfectant.
Right.
And so use something that's pretty intense, like Listerine. You know, is it Listerine, the ones that are horrible? The
Some of those taste good now, so
not
make sure
the
you don't
minty
get
ones,
not,
the really strong ones.
that one that's yellow.
Yeah, that's the one I'm thinking about.
Cepacol, I want to say, or something like that.
Cepacol, those are really strong, right? And you actually do need to do that just for the safety, health, and safety of your child. And I guarantee you, if you do it fast enough, your child will connect it to your child will know, oh my God, you know, every time I do this, I'm getting this disgusting stuff to wash out my mouth. They won't do it again. And it's kind of as Shannon said, as you said, Shannon, this does have a lot of it is just psychological, you know, and it bothers you because of that. Don't look at it that way. Just look at it as our kids do things because they're not embarrassed. They just do what their body needs or what they get a reaction for.
Sure. All right. We question about, and I want to bring this up only because we want to talk about the anxiety show coming up, but somebody wants to know, does puberty have a role in anxiety because of hormones? And again, I want to remind everybody that 2 weeks from today, that Wednesday right before Thanksgiving on the 27th of November, you've been asking for it. Dr. Granpeesheh has agreed to do it, an entire hour on anxiety.
A Wednesday before,
Yep.
Right.
So it's that Wednesday the 27th during Ask Dr. Doreen. She will be talking with us about anxiety. You'll have an opportunity to ask questions. We're going to devote the whole hour because we want to be thankful for peace, right?
Yes.
Right? So having said that, puberty, does it have a role in anxiety because of the hormones?
Yes. The short answer is no question about it. You see that also in typically developing kids. You see that in women with menopause.
Thank you. Thank you.
I mean, a hormone change will cause anxiety because you are experiencing things that you're not comfortable with or familiar with, and especially if you have like a shift in estrogen, then you are actually going to experience anxiety on its own. If you have testosterone, boys, aggression often is similar in anxiety. Like you have a similar feeling when you're very upset or angry or hyped up. Neurotransmitters are running high, dopamine and all of that, and then it'll be similar to anxiety. So yeah, you will see puberty affecting anxiety for sure, but you also with typically developing people, by the time you hit puberty, you have other what we call defense mechanisms or ways to cover yourself or protect yourself so that you're not as anxious. Habits. Mm-hmm. That's why a lot of teens start to do things like drugs
and smoking
and all these other things because they're seeking out ways to kind of have less anxiety. That's why peer pressure, because once you feel part of a peer group, you have less anxiety, all of that. But, and then there's healthy ways to control it as well, which is some of the stuff we're going to talk about in 2 weeks.
Well, which we will look forward to. And if you have questions about anxiety, you can start sending them now. I'll put them in a file so we can have them specifically for that show. We're almost out of time, so I just wanted to take a second and let people know that you have, I can't get it to come up on my screen for whatever reason, but you have an event that's coming up in Florida that you're going to be speaking. I believe it's on the 5th of December. Does that sound right, or is it the 4th? Do you know?
I don't know. I think it's the 5th. I'm not sure. I just go and speak where they tell me to, but I think it's the 5th. It's that Thursday.
And if you go to centerforautism.com on the front page, I just can't get it to come up right now on my device. I have gremlins. You can register for that event, and it's important that you register RSVP.
It's in Fort Myers.
Okay.
And I think I'm not sure the length of the thing, but I think we're reviewing the CARD program, and it'll be a pretty small group because we do this usually when we want to open a location, and we really want to open a location right now in the Fort Myers area. But and so I will be there speaking. I'd be happy to, you know, help advise parents who come and hear the talks as well.
If you're in that area, it's a great opportunity to meet Dr. Granpeesheh, and so we encourage you to RSVP for that. And also in the news today, there is a press release about CARD helping older kids, and so I wanted to give you just a couple of seconds to talk about.
That came out today.
So many of you people will ask about what about programs for our kids that are a little bit older. You've always been helping our teenagers and young adults. On the
We've
spectrum.
had a lot of back and forth with this. We've done a lot of work with adults for many years, but we've really done a big initiative in the recent years, and we're very focused on kind of teaching our adolescents just, you know, daily living skills and so on, but then also preparing them for jobs. So we've really gone into leisure, self-help, daily living, but now mainly a lot of vocational, because, you know, we want to make sure our kids end up doing things that are functional and have a place to. My dream, I always say this, and I keep saying it because I believe ultimately it'll come true, is some sort of a community, you know, where we can have our kids learn vocational skills and live there and also work there and have all sorts of things in the community for them. This is kind of timely given your next guest.
I was just going to say it all dovetails well together.
Yeah. So we're doing a lot of vocational stuff with our adults now, and it's an important thing for us. And, you know, we hope to just be able to reach more and more adults and be able to help them.